And that business plan I took around, and I went to every bank, to which every single bank, everyone I showed it to either said I was stupid, it would never happen, or no, this is my family, everybody. So I got this one bank, M&T Bank, which is a local bank around here. And they said, kid, we like this idea. And we think we can do an SBA backed loan, to which I didn't know what that meant.
Mhm.
And he said, but we need collateral. We're just trying to make enough money so that money can work for us so we can buy our time back. Well, I'm back. This is 16, 17 years old. That's all I was trying to do then, is
Mhm.
just buy time. And seeing this, I got this crazy idea. I'm like, wait a second. You can just lock the doors and go snowboard because you're in control.
Mhm.
Now that idea festered in my mind and I needed my own store.
Yeah.
My lease came up in my biggest store. So I bought a building, 2 buildings down, and it was a dilapidated paint store that I was going to convert into a strip mall. And I did this. I just want to give you the year, and you already know what I'm talking about. It was 2008,
Mhm.
before the
The
Great
crash.
Recession hit.
Yeah.
We had no idea this was going to happen. We'd seen
Mhm.
fractures in the markets and different things, but I was too new to understand that this
Mhm.
was a recession that was going to hit and how severe it was. I make a 2-point spread. You pay me 14. I'm making money twice on every single dollar. My money's working for me 2 times when your money's working for you once.
Mhm.
What?
Yeah, right? And your
What?
frame of reference is Wall Street, right? Like
Wall Street.
traditional banking, all that. And all of a sudden it's like, what? What is this?
I
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using Newcalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Chris Naugle, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we'll start with where you were born, go up to today. Then we want to talk about Flip Out Academy. We want to talk about all the stuff that you're doing to help people. Like everything you do every day, it must be fun because you're adding value everywhere you go. Thanks again for being here, bud.
My pleasure, and what an honor to be on the show. So yeah, I was born in a small little town called Lockport, New York, and it's a suburb of Buffalo, New York. Really kind of I don't want to call it a Rust Belt city, but kind of a Rust Belt city. I mean, we were most known for the locks, the Erie Canal locks, and that's where I grew up, and I loved every minute of it. The
Yeah.
small city, small town feel. I was friends with all the people I went to school with. You got to know everybody, who was who, and I just loved it. But I didn't grow up in the city. I grew up out in the town, so I was kind of secluded. And as a child, one of the things I did is I was kind of I'm a visionary today, but back when I was a kid, I was just a dreamer. Like I
Yeah.
would get these ideas from magazines, ideas from BMX Plus, Snowboarder magazines, different videos that I watched on VHS. And these ideas would fester in my mind. I would take the idea, and I'll just use one, for example. When I was
Sure.
really young, I had this dream of I wanted a dirt bike.
Mhm.
Right. Because, I didn't come from a family of money. I came
Yeah.
from a very lower middle class. And how I would do this is I would I would read magazines and I would look at the pictures of this dirt bike. And then I would go into I'm trying to think what that paper was called. There was a paper where you'd buy like used stuff, and it's not going to come to me, but
Was it Penny Saver?
Penny Saver. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I found a KX60. I was just a little guy.
Yeah.
And all I could do was think about this thing. So in school, I would draw pictures of this thing. I would draw pictures of me riding this dirt bike. I would go to bed at night and I would have dreams of this. And I want to preface and forward pace a little bit. Those same kind of dreams came when I wanted to be a pro snowboarder. And then when I started surfing, like I've always had that little innate ability to
Yeah.
think about something profusely day in and day out, so much so that my dreams became reality.
Mhm.
And I mean that truly. But back at this one, this KX 60, I would dream about this thing over and over. And my mom, who didn't have any money, we lived in a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house,
Mhm.
but my mom was a good saver. But how she would save is she would go to the grocery store and whatever money, because back then we actually used cash,
Mhm.
she'd get change and I'd watch her and she would show me this. I think intently, I don't really know, but she would drop the change in this. She had this glass jar, this
Mhm.
big glass jar, and it made that sound.
Mhm.
And we needed a lawnmower one time. And I remember she told me, she said, I'm going to save change up and then we're going to buy a lawnmower next summer. And darn well she did. She bought
Mhm.
that lawnmower. So how I did this is I learned the saving thing
Mhm.
and I wanted this dirt bike so bad. So I would save. I would go out and I would wash. My grandparents lived in a mobile home. So I would go there and I'd go around because a mobile home is pretty easy. You just go around neighbor to neighbor to neighbor. And I would ask, can I wash your windows? And they'd all give me like a couple bucks. $5 was a lot back then. And I would save it. I'd give it all to my mom and she put it in this little black box.
Mhm.
I did this. I don't even know how long. In the wintertime, I'd go to my neighbors and I'd shovel their driveways and they'd throw me a couple bucks. So I kept doing this over and over. And I remember I'd gotten a little taller, so the KX60 would have kind of been too small of a bike. But my mom, for some weird reason, she said, "Hey, Chris, do you want to go to Hebler's and look at dirt bikes?"
Mhm.
Yeah, come on, Ma, let's go.
You
So
don't
she
have to
took
ask me twice.
yeah, you don't have to ask me twice. So she
Right.
takes me to this shop called Hebler's, to
Mhm.
which I had frequented because obviously I was that dreamer, but I'd never bought anything. And I knew the owner of the place. His name was Joe. And I remember I went there and my mom must have called ahead because this isn't a normal thing. But I remember talking to Joe and I was looking at the dirt bikes and he's like, "Hey, Chris, do you want to ride one of these?" And I'm like, "Really? You'd let me ride one?" And he
Kind of.
said, "Yeah, like we'll bring them out. Let's bring the Suzuki and the Kawasaki out." And they did, and I zipped them around the side, and it was like the greatest day ever, right? I'm
Yeah,
riding
kind of.
brand new dirt bikes. I'm literally fulfilling this dream that I'd had for so long, over a year. And then at the end, we're just leaving, and I thanked Joe. And my mom, before we got in the car, she looks at me, she stops me, and she says, "Chris, would you like to take one of those dirt bikes home? Which one would you like?" I thought she was kidding with me. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, mom. Yeah, yeah. The KX would be great. I love that bike. It was
Yeah.
perfect." And she says, "Okay, let's go buy it." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Chris, all that money you've been saving on all those things in the black box, you saved up enough money." So I called ahead and I said, we wanted to come ride some dirt bikes and we were going to buy one. So Joe had this all arranged. And lo and behold, I took that dirt bike home. So like that's a young example of kind of how I operated and how I dreamed and just kind of my first experience of saving money for a particular thing that I really wanted and then having that fulfilled.
It's like a manifestation,
It really was. My whole life
right?
is just one giant manifestation, I feel
And
like.
your mom sort of lit the fire.
She did. She
I
did.
mean, how cool is that?
It's really cool. And just a little bit more about my mom. I write about her a lot and I've got 6 books and she's in every single one of them. And I always call her the unconditional one.
Yeah.
And it really comes from, you ever see the movie Rudy?
Yeah, love that movie.
But remember in Rudy didn't have a lot of friends and he had
Mhm.
barely anyone that believed in him. He had his
Yeah.
one best friend who died in the factory, right?
Mhm.
He believed in him. And there was only one other person that believed in Rudy, and that was that janitor,
Mhm.
right? So like in my life, I've had very few people that have believed in me, especially in my younger years. Like when I wanted to open my first business, it was a clothing line called Fat Clothing Company. Like nobody really believed in that. I told all my friends about it and a couple of them said, "Oh yeah, that'd be cool." But none of them really believed I could do it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. But my mom, she always believed in me. So
Yeah.
that's why I just call her the unconditional one. But let me just kind of forward pace. As a child, growing up out in the town, we didn't really have a lot of kids in our neighborhood because everybody was pretty far apart. But I built a BMX track out back. I built skateboard ramps out back. My backyard became like my place, that my haven.
Mhm.
And I remember one day my best friend Jack, who I worked at that time, I was about 14. I worked on his dad's farm. So
Mhm.
at 14 years old, we were out picking, corn and pumpkins and apples. And that's what I did to make money to put gas in this dirt bike. And
Mhm.
it's kind of funny. That same dirt bike I mentioned, it might have been a another one, but it was still a Kawasaki. I rode that dirt bike to and from the farm every day.
Yeah.
I carved trails out to get there.
Mhm.
These are cool memories. It's just haven't really done this. But one day, winter was coming. So in the winter, you can't really ride dirt bikes.
Mhm.
Jack brings over what looked like a long skateboard with bindings on it. And I knew it was a snowboard, but
Mhm.
I'd never had one, never seen one, never even thought about it. I was a skateboarder and a dirt bike kid. And we're out in the garage just bouncing around on this thing. And he said, "Hey, we really should go snowboarding this winter." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Ask for a snowboard for Christmas." So I asked my mom for a snowboard. Lo and behold, she got me a used look Burt Lamar. This would have been back in the 80s. And that's where my love for snowboarding came. And we'd go up the street, and I had a four-wheeler too. So we'd ride the four-wheeler up the street, and there was like a track, like a motocross track that we
Mhm.
built up in the woods. And there was a hill that went down to it. And that's where I learned how to snowboard. It was just this tiny little hill.
Mhm.
And I remember we'd build jumps on this hill, and we'd make the jumps out of snow. But for some reason, I'm surprised I didn't become an architect or an engineer. We would construct these snow jumps, and we would go get twigs and sticks from the
Mhm.
trees, and we would fortify or support this jump with sticks. I don't know why we did this. We thought it made it stronger. And, we would just hurl ourselves off these jumps. But one day I got an opportunity to go to the resort.
Mhm.
Kissing Bridge was what it was called. And we went there, and I remember I went up to the top. Now, I'd never snowboarded down a real
Mhm.
hill, right? Like, we don't have mountains here. We just have hills.
Mhm.
And I got all the way up to the top. I fell getting off the lift as usual. And I remember it felt like the entire day it took me to make it to the bottom. I was beat up, I was exhausted, but more importantly, I was completely frustrated because I thought a skateboarder, I'm going to be able to pick this up like that. For some reason, I had this idea that manifestation in my mind that I was literally going to get on this thing and I was going to rip. I was going to be
Mhm.
a shredder. That wasn't the case. And I almost gave up. I remember I went in the lodge. I was soaking wet because I didn't have proper gear. We didn't have the money to buy all that. And Jack, he was still up on the hill somewhere because he left me because he's not going to wait for me.
Mhm.
And he saw me in there, and I'm like, that's okay. I think I'm just going to hang out in the lodge until you guys are done. He's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I don't know. I just can't get it." And he said, "Come on, I'll teach you." And he did. And I found a love for snowboarding that was greater than anything else I ever found. And at that very moment, I got this idea in my mind, that manifestation, which was followed by me drawing on my Trapper Keepers, snowboarding pictures of me doing all these things that I saw in the videos and in the magazine. Same thing as that dirt bike, but
Mhm.
I wanted to be a pro snowboarder. Now, as I get through this, your audience will find out I did end up becoming a pro snowboarder, had a very, very long and successful snowboarding career full of broken bones, torn ligaments, and all sorts of fun stuff. But I did amazing things, rode X Games, and I still snowboard avidly today. But let me go back to that story. So I was getting to a point with the snowboarding is I loved it so much, but
Mhm.
we didn't have money, so I had still had to work. And at this time, remember, I went from 14 on the farm. So now I'm in a forward pace to 16 years old. I had a job at a restaurant, at this Italian restaurant. The owner of the place was just a nasty human being, just
Mhm.
degraded me terribly. But I still worked because it was my first real job and I
Yeah.
didn't want to disappoint anybody. And I remember one day I just had it. Like he pushed me to a point where I was probably clinically depressed. Back then they didn't just throw meds around for that kind of stuff, but I
Right.
was couldn't do anything right, at work. So that translated to school and to everything else. I just couldn't do anything right. But the problem with this job really wasn't how badly I was treated. That was just the catapult. The problem was they always wanted me to work weekends.
Mm.
Clearly, right? A restaurant's busier on weekends.
Sure.
But guess what comes on weekends? That's when snowboarding happened. That's when all the snowboard contests
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
So I had to make this decision. I'm like literally caught where I had a snowboard contest, and if I would ask Dom was his name if I could have a day off because I wanted to compete, I was so excited. He would say, "No, you're coming to work or you're fired."
Yeah.
So one day I had just had it. He was hitting on me, telling basically telling me to go in the cooler and get things that really weren't there, or if they were, I don't know, I couldn't find them.
Yeah.
And I came out, and he's screaming at me, and I just took my apron off. I just threw it, and I said, "I quit." But you see, I had been contemplating this so long that when I quit, now I bet you your audience can relate. I'm sure they've had jobs like that where you just push to a point, right? Where there's just, you've had that, right?
Mhm.
You just get there. And I had gotten there. But weeks and weeks and weeks up to this moment, I had been planning and dreaming this idea. Like, what can I do to make money that will be just enough to pay for this 86 Buick Skyhawk that I have, to
Mhm.
fund me to go on these snowboarding trips and pay for my pass. That was pretty much it. Maybe a new snowboard every year, but I was going to get sponsored, so that wasn't going to be a problem. So I dreamt up this idea. Now, my art teacher in high school, his name was Mr. Mahalski.
Mhm.
I would work after school with him and print T-shirts, because he was the one that printed all the high school's T-shirts. So
Mhm.
I'd learn how to screen print and everything. And one day I just said to him before I quit this job, I said, "Mr. Mahalski, if I came up with some designs and I paid for the shirts, could you show me how to make a screen so that we could print some shirts with my logos on them?" And he said, "Absolutely, I'd be honored." So we did. We printed a dozen long sleeve white T-shirts with this logo. I still have one of them. This is from 1992, of this guy eating an ice cream cone, and it had a big P in the middle and said Fat Clothing Company,
Mhm.
PHAT. And that was my idea. So that day when I quit that job, I
Mhm.
came home to my mom thinking she was going to be so upset with me. I
Yeah.
quit my first real job. And I said, "Mom, I quit." She said, "Why are you home early?" I quit my job, but Mom, I've got this idea. I'm going to create this clothing line called Fat Clothing Company. I'm going to print T-shirts with Mr. Mahalski. I'm going to sell them out of my backpack. My friends are going to help me, and I'm going to make enough money to not need a job. And most parents, my dad thought this was the dumbest idea ever. My dad really wasn't so much part of my life at this point. Not really going to get too deep into that. My dad had a drinking problem, which affected, they got divorced, and he just kind of drifted a little bit from my life. And nonetheless, my mom was the one. She's the one that raised me. So when I said this to her, I thought she was going to be, saying this is a dumb idea. And she said, "That's a great idea." She said, "Why don't you take the room in the basement and make that your office?" And lo and behold, I did. Now, in for dad, I did call my dad. My dad was good at building things, so he came down and he helped me build out the office, which was a
Mhm.
really nice thing of him to do. But Fat Clothing Company was born. And I
Wow.
remember I would take and print shirts, sell them in school, buy 2 dozen shirts, sell them out of my backpack, get my friends to sell them out of their backpacks by giving them free merchandise.
Mhm.
And that's how I built this clothing line at 16 years old.
Wow.
And as I was traveling for snowboarding, I would be driving down the 90, which is like the main throughway that goes from, you can go from Buffalo all the way across New York State to Vermont. And that
Yeah.
was the road we would take. And I'd map out, back then we didn't have GPS, we had atlases. I'd map out where all the snowboard and skateboard shops were along the way. And I would stop and I would pitch them my clothing line. And some of them bought, some of them didn't. But that's how I made money. And I was wholesaling clothing.
Mhm.
And I was learning a lot and I was having a blast. And here's a cool thing. And I know we got to get on with the rest of it, but this is just such a pivotal,
This is
important
so cool,
piece.
dude. This is so cool.
I talk about this and I speak about, because I speak nationally all
Yeah.
over the place. And I talk about this one thing. School was never easy for me, but I always did well. But when I became an entrepreneur, when I had this company, I changed my curriculum. I went to the guidance counselor and I changed all my classes and I went for business law. Anything that had business in it, I took those classes: business law, business math, economics, accounting, typing, and all these different classes. But you see, school had a major turnaround, because now I wasn't going to school because I had to, because I needed good grades so mom would be proud. I went to school to learn, to apply that night in my business.
Mhm.
And my teachers got to know that I was running this business because they'd see me hawking my stuff around school. And they kind of took a liking to that. And Mr. Crawley was his name. He was my accounting teacher. Isn't it funny how, like, we always remember those teachers in our lives? Like, we were
Mhm.
kids, right? I'm
Mhm.
48 now. This is back when I was 16 years old,
Mhm.
15, 16, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And, and I remember their names. I remember everything they did for me. It's wild how that works. But, I just really took a liking to school. And
Mhm.
even when I went to community college, I only went for 2 years. I took all business classes. I was mad they made me take bowling because it wasn't part of me building my business. But this is how I built Fat Clothing Company. And Fat
Mhm.
Clothing Company, let me tell you one more story and then we'll move on. I was at this one shop called Hardpack in Canandaigua, New York, this tiny
Mhm.
little, beautiful little town. And we're there. I was selling him my clothes. He did a nice size order, so I was pumped. And he stops me. His name was Tim, and he says, "Hey, Chris, do you want to go snowboarding?" And I kind of was thinking it was midday. I'm like, "I'd love to go snowboarding. When do you want to go?" And he said, "Well, let's go right now." I paused and I kind of looked around, and I knew this, but he was the only one in the shop working. There was nobody else there. It was just Tim and me. And I'm thinking, okay, he wants to go snowboarding right now. So I asked him, I said, Tim, I said, don't you have to work the shop? He says, I own the shop. I'll just close the doors. Let's go snowboard. And we did. And we had an awesome time snowboarding. But
Wow.
right there, Mike, I got this idea. Remember, I was searching for freedom, right? So I think we're always searching for freedom. The ultimate thing in life is to have freedom of your time. And that's what we do. We work our entire lives to build up all this money, all this wealth, to really do one thing: buy back our time. That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make enough money so that money can work for us so we can buy our time back. Well, I'm back. This is 16, 17 years old. That's all I was trying to do then, is just buy time. And seeing this, I got this crazy idea. I'm like, wait a second. You can just lock the doors and go snowboard because you're in control. Now that idea festered in my mind, and I needed my own store. And I came up with the whole concept. I was selling my clothing at this place in the flea market, and I worked with this guy, Steve, who sold like bootleg stuff. And I pitched the idea to him: let's open a store, skateboard, snowboard shop. Let's call it Fat Man, because I had fat clothing that was recognized in Lockport. Let's do Fat Man in the Lockport Mall. And well, the whole idea started. I went to the SBA, Small Business Development Center, in that college where I was at. They helped me, Mr. Nemi, another teacher, helped me write my entire business plan, to which I still have, and I show it on YouTube all the time. And that business plan I took around, and I went to every bank, to which every single bank, everyone I showed it to, either said I was stupid, it would never happen, or no, this is my family, everybody. So I got this one bank, M&T Bank, which is a local bank around here. And they said, you know, kid, we like this idea, and we think we can do an SBA backed loan, to which I didn't know what that meant. And he said, but we need collateral. What do you have for collateral? I kid you not, Mike, I didn't even know what the word meant. I guess I wasn't that smart. So I asked this, and I kind of felt dumb asking. And he says, oh, like something of value that would support or collateralize the loan. I'm like, oh, yeah. I've got a 1986 Buick Skyhawk. I've got this wicked KX 125. You should see it, FMF Gold Series pipe. I've got a baseball and football card collection that it would blow your mind. What do you say? And I'm elaborate. I'm kind of going a little crazy with this, but he clearly said no. Clearly said no. So I went home. I told Mom that was my last option. Like after that, the whole dream of Fat Man Board Shops was dead. And I told my mom, and my mom just kind of looked up into the sky, and you could tell she was thinking about something. She said, well, Chris, what about our house? And she said, our house. Now, see, it was never our house. It was my mom's house. My mom had got the house in the divorce. It wasn't my house, but my mom said, what about our house? And I'm like, wait, we put the house up for collateral? And she said, yeah, we've got enough collateral in this house, about 70 grand, that should be sufficient. Like, I'd be willing to do that for you. Because remember, I said, out of all the people in my life, my mom was the one that always believed in my crazy dreams and crazy ideas. Now, looking back, 48, looking back at my 17-year-old self back then, who clearly said, yeah, let's put the house up on the line. Like, that was the stupidest thing my mom could have ever done. Because like, listen, this is 1994 we're talking about when this is going on. Like, skateboard, snowboard shops weren't exactly a prevalent or popular thing. Like, it was a newer thing.
There was some risk here.
Some serious risk. And I'm just like, yeah, let's go. So the interesting thing is that store did open November of 1994. It is still open today. I sold it in 2010, but it still operates. You can look it up, fatmanboardshops.com, just to see a little memory flash. But that store happened, and life happened for me too, because at that point in time, I was an amateur snowboarder who went on to become a pro. I now had my dream, which was this skateboard snowboard shop where I spent every waking second. But I also had a new realization that if I fail, and boy, oh boy, were there tough times. There were times where I couldn't make that payment to the bank. And boy, I scrimped and saved and did anything. But what this did for me is at a very young age, 17, 18, I was 18 when it actually opened, just so you all know the time frame. You know, I didn't have a life like most kids. I couldn't just go out and do things. So I had to work. Store was open 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. and Sundays 12 to 5. And guess who the employee was? Me.
Mhm.
And then Randy was the next one. But my life changed. I had to get serious.
Mhm.
Life had to get serious. I had to hunker down. I had to not make mistakes. I had to learn. I had to learn accounting. I had to learn so many things that most kids would never even want to learn, let alone, spend time learning. And this is what I did. And this is what carved who I am today. I mean, I was I was an entrepreneur at 16, but I became a real entrepreneur at this point.
Yeah.
And the day I paid that loan off was a monumental day. I threw a massive rager keg party at my house. We almost went to jail. My mom was so mad at me because she's like, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have a little celebration party in the backyard, a couple friends, 500 friends to be specific, and
Okay.
lots of cops. But that was a fun night until it ended. But yeah, so that's what I did, and from that point, I literally lived, Mike, what I would call to most people a dream.
Mhm.
I was living in a dream every day, almost like, pinch me, so I can wake up, but I didn't want to wake up. I was a pro snowboarder traveling the world on somebody else's budget. Option NFA, my sponsor back then, and all my other sponsors, Dragon, Red Bull. Actually, it was Monster first, then Red Bull.
Mhm.
They footed the bill for all this stuff. And
Yeah.
then I had my shop back home, who all my buddies worked for me. And in the summer, we would skateboard all summer, and we would put events on outside. And I was expanding my operations. I had 2 stores at that time, and man, it was just incredible. And now I'm gonna get on to the next phase. You want me to pause on anything? Any questions you wanna unpack there?
So I think I know the answer to this, but who was the most influential person to you growing up?
My mom, actually, God was always the most
Yeah.
influential person. My mom
Yeah.
instilled that in me, but mom was close second.
Yeah. She sounds amazing, man.
Yeah,
Just
she is.
absolutely amazing. So so you go to high school, you graduate, you go to community college for a couple of years. I did too, by the way. Um, and so then after community college, you've got your store, you're working your store, you're professional, snowboarder, all that kind of stuff. So you're traveling the world, you're having a great time. When was it that you paid off the loan?
It was a 5-year loan, so I was 18 when that
So
technically when the store
23?
opened. Yeah, so yeah.
Cool. So when did you
Actually, I'm
sell
sorry.
the
No, it wouldn't have been 23. It would have I must have paid it off early because and I'll explain why in just a second. That next phase we're going into, you'll see, because I was
it was the
23 when this
change.
next thing
It
happened.
was the
So
change in the jar.
21, 22 must have been. So maybe it wasn't as long of a loan as I thought. Yeah, because I had paid that loan off. Yeah, there's no way. So I must have been like 21 or 22.
Yeah. That's amazing. You grew up really fast.
Yeah, almost too
Really fast.
fast. I missed out on a lot, but I
Yeah.
also experienced a lot.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
It prepared you for the rest of your life, right? So
it did.
so you go to community college for a couple of years. At some point, you sell the store. When was it that you sold the store? How much
Yeah,
long? How much?
let me get into that. It's a
Yeah.
little bit longer, and there's something really unique that happened, and something that's, I think, just super relevant for where we're at today in
Yeah.
2025. So let me just kind of get into that. I had opened my third store,
Mhm.
and it was in this little area called Orchard Park, right by. It was about 15 minutes from the closest resort, so it was this like
Mhm.
little area. If anyone knows the Buffalo Bills stadium is in Orchard Park, New
Yeah,
York. So
I was just going to say it sounds familiar. Yeah.
yeah, that's why. His stadium was like literally go across the thruway, and there's a
Mhm.
stadium from where my store was. And we did something unique. And I brought in a partner for this one, Steve, and we opened a boutique that was modeled after like New York City Soho stores, like
Mhm.
Stussy, and um, there was another. It was Stussy and Supreme. I'm trying to think of the other shop. It was a famous skateboard shop, but we modeled this boutique off of these really cool New York City shops, and it was
Yeah.
a boutique clothing, snowboard, and skateboard shop. It was really freaking cool. But we spent a lot of money doing this. Money we didn't have, money that we borrowed because we had these operations. And so now I had 3 stores going, same thing. But I'll never forget this very moment. It's seared in my mind, and it's probably seared in a lot of your audience's mind and yours as well. I had just got off a plane the day before from a trade show in California. I'm driving down the thruway to my new store,
Mhm.
and on the radio, I hear of a plane hitting a tower and then another plane hitting the tower. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? Somebody
Mhm.
that's just, bad pilot. Like, and then obviously we all know that was 9/11.
Mhm.
Okay. So after 9/11, what happened is something that happened for the first time in my life, a recession. And that recession took me to my knees.
Mhm.
I was highly leveraged. I was running these shops. I didn't have a lot of expenses because I was just a snowboard kid. I wasn't home enough to really accumulate things, but I couldn't afford my bills. And I remember sitting there in the shop, this brand new store, saying, I'm going to go bankrupt. I'm going to lose all of this.
Mhm.
And I don't even know what happened. Business was down 30%. It was literally like somebody flipped the light switch and everything just shut off.
Mhm.
And that's what happens in a recession. I
Yeah.
mean, and this was the dot-com crash.
Mhm.
So I remember I needed to get a job. This would be the first time. So remember, my last job was when I was 16.
Mm.
Last personal
Real
job. I
real
did
job.
some
Yeah,
side job,
yeah.
real job. So now I got to get a job. My buddy Mike worked at Little Caesars. No kidding. I was
Mhm.
like, hey, at night after I'm done at the shop, I'll go deliver pizzas, make enough money, pay my car payment. So I went into Little Caesars thinking this is a shoe in. My buddy Mike works here. They said no. They weren't hiring delivery drivers. Little did I know, during a recession, people buy less pizza, but learning lesson.
Yeah.
So I put my resume out there and I got responses pretty quickly. Now, I want to preface, you maybe have picked this up. My resume wasn't anything spectacular. It literally fit on one side of one piece of paper.
Yeah.
High school, community
Yeah.
college,
Not too expensive,
self-employed,
right?
pro snowboarder. Right?
Right.
It's not like
Bankrupt store
anything.
owner. Let's
You're
see.
right, right.
Right?
So the only companies, and I got 2 responses to my resume being put out there, were Wall Street firms. Now, this is a unique thing, and I had no knowledge of Wall Street,
Yeah.
had no clue what Wall Street was, never traded stocks, didn't know the name. I mean, I was a snowboarder. Come on, I
Mhm.
didn't care about that stuff. But I remember I got this interview and I had to go to Rochester for it. I didn't have a suit. I'd never put a suit on in my life. I wore a hoodie and a toque every single day of my life.
Yeah.
So I went to my grandma because my grandma was, like Graham would be like the bougie person in my
Mhm.
family at that time. My grandma's, since gone, but I loved her so much, Dad's mom. And she took me to this store, Lurch and Daly's, and she got me my very first suit for my very first interview, complete with a black zip up tie, because you all know I didn't know how to tie a tie. So we just had to do this zip up. So I went to this interview and lo and behold, I got hired.
Mhm.
I got hired because what I had come to find out, I've spent 22 years in that industry. And what I found out is that what that industry looks for are self-starters, people that
Mhm.
can be just sent out on their way and have sales experience and will just go get it. Well,
Yeah.
clearly, like you've heard my whole story, like that was me to a T.
Yeah.
So I started in that firm. I didn't like some of the people I worked with. I felt like they were shady. I felt like what they did in their sales practice was a bait and switch. And it was very different than the sales that I did at my store, where I felt truly passionate about helping customers get what they really needed and wanted.
Right.
So I ended up leaving that firm and I took a position with the other firm, which was a very large New York City firm. And I spent 14 years there. But I want to kind of just get everybody in the mindset. Just remember, I'm now in Wall Street.
Mhm.
Okay. I got my licenses, which was very hard for me, but I got them and I had to wear a black, a blue, or a gray suit
Mhm.
every single day. That was the dress code. You had to wear it. And I had a really hard time. I mean, really hard time with this because I was a snowboarder and I felt
Mhm.
like I was abandoning who I really was at the core to do this thing for money. And it
Almost
felt
faking it till you make it
it
kind of thing.
felt
Yeah.
so wrong, but I liked it. I loved meeting with clients. I
Mhm.
loved helping them. I just couldn't I just couldn't get into the whole dress code of wearing a suit.
Mhm.
So there was this one snowboard company, and some of you will know this name. It's called Volcom. Back then, they were relatively a newer company, but for their athletes, they made suits.
Mm.
Shaun White was just a little tyke back then, but
Mhm.
he rode for Volcom, and I saw him in a suit at one of the rider pole events that they did, and I'm like, okay, I don't ride for Volcom, but I know the riders and I know the rep. So I called the rep and I said, hey, you got to do me a solid. I need a black, a blue, and a gray suit. Can you hook me up with some Volcom suits? I'll pay anything. So because my first year in the Wall Street world, I made 74 grand. Now, by all accounts today, like that doesn't register for some of you listening. But back then, that was more money than I'd ever made in my entire life in one year.
Mhm.
In my shop, I made maybe 30 grand, which
Yeah.
which that's all I needed.
Yeah.
And I made 74 grand. So like cost for a suit was no big deal. So
Mhm.
he did. He sent me suits. So now every day I went to work in a Volcom suit. So I felt I felt properly dressed. I felt like I still was that snowboarder in disguise, kind of like
Mhm.
Superman. So that went on, and I spent 16 years in Wall Street doing that, and I spent 14 of those 16 at that firm. Now, bear in mind, now I'm doing this, and there's articles in the newspapers and everything how I transitioned. Now I'm a Wall Street kid, but I still ran my shops. So I
Mhm.
would finish at Wall Street, and I would literally drive straight from my office right to my store. I would change in the office. I'd put my hoodie on, my toque on, and I'd work till 9 o'clock at night selling snowboards. It was just this really cool thing that was happening. But now I had money. But something else happened. And I can't make this up, but it was probably the single greatest lesson I ever got in being in business, in being an entrepreneur. And here's what it was. I was forced, I didn't do this by choice. I was forced because of a recession to leave the thing that I loved and go do something I didn't think I would love. And in doing so, I was forced to stop working in the stores because you can't. I had to be in
Sure.
the office every day. I had to be out there selling stocks, bonds, mutual funds, life insurance, all that good stuff that I did. So I couldn't be in the shop. So I literally had to move the people in my business up into managerial roles.
Mhm.
And I just listen, most business owners, they go to work, they do everything better than their employees because
Mhm.
it's their business. They know it better. And that's how I thought. So it
Mhm.
was very hard for me to kind of disconnect. And I struggled with that in the beginning, but I realized something when I started working on the business, not in the business, I started focusing on marketing and doing cool events during certain times of the year and setting up limo trips from this college to bring college kids to my shop to rent snowboards for the season. I never would have thought about that stuff working in the store, but now because I was working on it and my employees were in it working, I was able to focus on different things.
Mhm.
My business exploded. It was like, you talk about hockey sticks. It hockey sticked. And
Mhm.
and I kept working on it. And I kept having more and more fun just coming up with these ideas. We developed skateboard teams and snowboard teams. We made snowboard films and skateboard films. We did giant premieres. We created newsletters and all sorts of mailing lists and these marketing campaigns way before I knew anything about any of this stuff. I was just doing it because it was cool. And that that helped my business skyrocket. While I was in Wall Street making hundreds of thousands of dollars, I had my little side project over here. And this was just a really fun period of time. And the reason, remember when you said 23, I
Mhm.
was 23 years old when I got licensed, when I started in Wall Street. That's why I knew I had already paid off the stores at that point.
Yeah.
And this went on for a long period of time. Matter of fact, that whole cycle of going to the Wall Street firm, then going to my shop in the winters, I had freedom of time because as an advisor, you can kind of make your schedule, especially as you're in the beginning, you can't because you have set hours,
Mhm.
because you're just the pond scum that has to do what they tell you to do. But I was success. I was like one of the top guys in the firm. So I got to do what I wanted to do as long as I put my numbers up.
Mhm.
I just was able to do anything. So I was traveling all over the world again, snowboarding, competing. I was rising up in those ranks. I rode in X Games in the early 2000s. So all this stuff was just going awesome. And then I remember one of my biggest clients. He wasn't my biggest client, but he was my wealthiest client. He was a real estate developer. And I just did some stuff for his kids, some 529 plans. But one day he's in my office and I just said to him, I said, "Hey, how come you don't invest more money with me? Like I've done
Mhm.
really good for your 529s. Like give me a shot." Like, I was kind of insinuating, like, I know you got money. Like give me a little bit of that. And he said to me, he said something very interesting. He says, "No." He said, "And let me tell you why." He said, "I'm in real estate. I know real estate really well. It's what I do every single day. I can invest my money in real estate and I can make a better return with less risk in something I know, like, and understand
Mhm.
better than you ever could get me." And I was kind of threatened by that. I'm like, "No way, I can do better in real estate." But it sat with me because he didn't never gave me any more business, but he gave me the best advice there because then I
Mhm.
said, "You know what? Well, if this is my wealthiest client and he just told me he can make a better return in real estate than he can in Wall Street. Well, I'm going to try real estate."
Mhm.
So I did my very first flip in 2006. Thought I was going to make 40 grand, made 8,700 bucks. Then in 2007, I did another flip with one of my business partners in the firm. And then next, I had the bug. I'm doing real estate. I'm a pro snowboarder. I got all this stuff going on. Now, at this point, I still have the shops.
Mhm.
So all that stuff's still going on. I bought my lease came up in my biggest store. So I bought a building, 2 buildings down, and it was a dilapidated paint store that I was going to convert into a strip mall. And I did this. I just want to give you the year, and you already know what I'm talking about. It was 2008,
Mm-hmm.
before the
The
Great
crash.
Recession hit.
Yeah.
We had no idea this was going to happen. We'd seen
Mhm.
fractures in the markets and different things, but I was too new to understand that this
Mhm.
was a recession that was going to hit and how severe it was. And a lot of people, you watch the movies and everything, and you're like, oh, you guys had to know something was coming. I swear to you, no, we didn't. Even our consultants didn't know.
Mhm.
We had no clue. It literally, just like I said in 2000, the 2000.com crash, it was like a light switch. It
Yeah.
hit, and then we knew. $400 or 400 points down, 500 points down, getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning, watching the futures to see what the market's going to open, to see is this going to change, or am I going to lose more clients today?
Is the
And
bleeding going to stop? Yeah.
it didn't. It didn't stop. It just kept
So,
going and getting worse.
Chris, real quick, we need to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about flipping, and we're going to talk about the Flip Out Academy and what
Okay,
you're doing to help people set themselves up for the rest of their lives. We'll be right
you
back.
got it.
Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Chris Naugle. And before the break, we were talking about the 2008 Great Recession, something that I lived through too. And I owned a real estate office. I had one of the largest real estate offices in the area. And yeah, it was really crazy. And it was something that for 3-4 years we were looking at each other going, this can't continue. This can't keep going like this. Right. But we never saw that coming. And it was one of those things that just caught us flat-footed. So go ahead with your story. I apologize for interrupting.
No. Perfect. 2008 just brought me to my knees, and I
Yeah.
almost lost it all. Almost went bankrupt with that strip mall. My girlfriend, who was living at my house, had to pay the mortgage and utilities just to keep things going. But what ended up happening next is in 2009, I was reading a lot from Warren Buffett books, and he said, buy low, sell high, and don't lose money. So I started buying apartment buildings, and I would just renovate them on the weekends and fix them up and rent them. And I got up to 36 units by 2014. I was, by all accounts, doing quite well with it. And at that point in time, then I had a bank, a traditional bank, who was going to do my next deal,
Mhm.
tell me no. And they said my debt to income ratio was out of whack.
Mhm.
So at that point, I didn't know what was going on. But what ended up happening is I ended up having that bank call my line of credit because I was out of their little criteria. And then after that, I didn't have the money to continue. I had to sell every one of those properties that I bought in 2009. And I'd have to believe if I was able to hang on to some of them through today, it would be worth a ton of money. But I didn't. I had to sell them all. And at that point, I pivoted and I went to I started flipping houses. Now, when I started flipping houses, I had a lot of success. I knew how to raise capital, and I just had good team building skills. And at that point, I got pretty good at this, me and my wife, with flipping, that I ended up creating this academy because I needed money. Right. I wanted to do something that was around real estate, something that made me money, and something I was passionate about. So we opened a coaching company. This is before all the big coaching companies came about, but we opened Flip Out Academy. And it was basically where we taught people in classroom settings how to flip houses. We would take them out into the field. We would help them raise private capital for their deals. We would show them how to build the property spec sheets and all the deal structures. So literally, I was just teaching people more how to raise capital, but then also the things to do with flipping the houses. And we were having mediocre success with that. We built this giant facility in the Eastern Hills Mall, because I went back to the mall at this point. Because you remember, what I forgot to tell you was in 2010, I had to sell Fat Man board shops because I just couldn't hold on to it while doing all this other stuff. And then 2014, I sold that strip mall, which that strip mall sale was profitable. And that's what seed funded Flip Out Academy.
There you go.
And Flip out was fun. Everything was going good, but we got this other big dream. Remember, back to that visionary manifestation. I had seen Tarek and Christina, who they had a show on HGTV.
Mhm.
We had seen them at a convention. And I said to my wife, I looked over at her, I said, sweetie, if we're ever going to get on that stage, we need our own TV show.
Mhm.
Now, remember, I had filmed for videos in snowboarding. I had my own snowboard films we made. So I knew videographers. So I hired my buddy Kyle to film us while flipping a house. The concept was simple. Jackass meets Flip or Flop. My buddies who were skateboard kids, because I still had the shop, friends from the shop, they would come into the house. They would be the demo guys.
Yeah.
They'd demo the house, build ramps with the demoed material, and we'd film all this while we put together a beautiful flip.
Mhm.
HGTV didn't see it as being what we thought it was. They didn't like it. So they said no. And they said, but here, if you could, we love you guys. If you could do a show like this with you and Blair, who was another pro snowboarder that was one of those skateboard demo guys.
Mhm.
If you guys are like the contractors, you're the money guy, Blair's the contractor, and your wife is the designer, I think we could do something with the show.
Mhm.
Lo and behold, we set out to kind of film pilots, and we got the show. And it was
Wow.
called Risky Builders. It aired in 2018. Now, an interesting thing about this period of time, because now Flip Out's going. So think about this. You got this real estate academy, right?
Mhm.
And you're teaching people how to flip houses. But now you just got approved for your own pilot on HGTV.
Mhm.
My mind is just literally lighting up with dollar signs because I'm like, oh my gosh, our company is going to just explode. We're going to have national exposure for this Flip Out Academy. So we went all in. I burned the boats. I told my financial firm that I was working for, which was a different one than before. I told them about the TV show. So excited because in that business, it's a regulated business. You need to get what's called an OBA, an outside business activity. And in that OBA, I told the compliance officer about what we were doing. And they said, we can't give you an OBA for this. There's no way. That's outside of our compliance guidelines. So I ended up having to sell my financial firm. And I did.
Wow.
And I burned the boats. 2018, I burned the boats. And I went all in on this TV show, Flipping in Flip Out Academy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of you probably could figure this out. The TV show didn't go. We went 6 times. We aired 6 different times, and Discovery bought HGTV and they decided to freeze all new shows. So we got cut. We got cut and I didn't really have an option, which Flip Out Academy, I was just getting sick of it. You know, people were just really, really difficult. They wouldn't listen, but then they would blame you for the things that didn't work with their flip. So I was kind of figuring out at that point, I was at a crux. I didn't know who I wanted to be when I grew up again.
Yeah.
You know, my snowboarding career had ended at 34 years old. Had a really bad crash out in Mammoth, California,
Sorry.
and just never recovered from it. Never came back to the level where I could compete at the level. So I lost all my sponsors. Now I didn't have the TV show, which was the biggest thing in my life. Like that's what I wanted to do. I had sold my financial firm and did not want to go back to that industry. I'd seen way too many things in the Wall Street world that just scared the living tar out of me. So I was lost. Who am I? I'm flipping houses. You know, who is Chris Naugle? And I remember, and this is going to get, you know, now we're going to kind of move past Flip Out. We're going to go into the final stage, which is where I'm at today.
Yeah.
I was out in Utah snowboarding, and I'd borrowed a lot of private money. I'd gotten really good at raising private money. We did 274 flips in our time, so quite a few, and had lots of rentals, 91 doors. And when I was out there, I called this guy, Mike. Mike was one of our private lenders, and I knew he was a very wealthy man. So I called him up. I said, hey, Mike, I'm out here snowboarding, but I got a deal I'd like to show you. Could we meet up while I'm out in your backyard? And he said, sure, let's meet at Cheesecake Factory. And at Cheesecake Factory, we sat down. I kind of getting into it. And I just said to him, I was still, you know, had those financial advisor roots. And I said to him, I said, Mike, I said, how do you lend all this money? That was a legitimate question.
Sure.
Which he didn't even pause. He just says, I lend from my own private bank. And I'm like, what? I'm thinking in my mind, this dude's way richer than I thought he was. He's got his own bank. And I said to him, I said, Mike, when we're done with lunch, can we go check out your bank? I literally thought he had a bank. And he
like
says,
a standing bank.
Yeah, like a physical brick and mortar bank.
Right. Because when you think bank, that's what you think, right?
Right. That's exactly what I thought.
It's monolith, right?
Yeah, he tells me, he kind of laughs and he chuckles and he says, I don't have a bank. I just mimic what a bank does. And I was intrigued. I'm like, all right, well, tell me about it. We're just eating lunch. And he goes on, he says, all I did is I changed one thing, Chris. I changed where my money goes first. I don't put it into a bank anymore. I put it into my own private banking system. And
Mhm.
remember, I was an advisor. So I'm thinking, all right, as an advisor, you think you know everything about finance. It's just how
Mhm.
you're trained, right? So everything he said, just think of this. I'm trying to put it into a box to figure out what it
Mhm.
is. First thing he says, my private bank gets guaranteed interest. It never changes. So I'm like, all right, what pays guaranteed interest? Fixed annuities, CDs, maybe bank accounts. I'm
Mhm.
classifying it. He says, I get paid dividends every single year on my money. I'm like, dividend stocks, what could this be? And the dividend and interest grow tax-free, and they're protected against judgments and liens if somebody trips and falls on one of my properties, and on and on and on. And there's a legacy for my family. And I'm like, what in the world
Mhm.
is this thing that Mike's got? Because I need that thing.
Yeah,
I
because that
need
doesn't
this
fit in
thing.
your frame of reference, right?
No, I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. I had a bunch of ideas, but
Mhm.
I'm like, what is this
Yeah.
private bank thing? And then he blows me away before he tells me what it was, because I didn't really have time. He's just on a tangent like I am right now. And he goes on and he says this is what got me. So pay attention, folks. He says, how it works, Chris, is you come to me with a deal like this. You
Mhm.
need 100 grand. What I do is I go to my private banking system and I take a loan for 100 grand and I give that money to you. And you pay me interest, 14% with points. I take that money that you pay me and I take it and I put it back into my private bank. So in my mind, remember, I'm a very visual human being. I
Mhm.
saw a circle.
Yeah.
Money started on the left. He puts it into this magic pot
Yep.
of money. The money moves from the left over to the right to
Mhm.
me, to which he charges me 14%. He gets a first lien collateralized position. He takes the interest that I'm paying him and he takes it around the bottom part of the circle. He puts it back in this magic pot of money that gives him guaranteed interest, dividends, tax-free, protected, all that good stuff. Here's where he throws me off, because all of you got that. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
He says, Chris, in my banking system, when I take 100,000 out, I take it out as a loan. Therefore, I'm not using my own money. So I still have 100 grand earning guaranteed interest plus dividends. You're paying me 14. My cost for that loan that I just took is 4%, because back then it was 4%. You all
Mhm.
know what I'm talking about in a second. But right now, this sounds pretty good, doesn't it? This is what
Not
I'm
bad.
hearing.
Not
Yeah,
bad. It's pretty
I'm
decent
sold,
spread,
right? I'm like,
right?
I'm in. Whatever this thing is, I'm in.
Mhm.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
And and he says, how does a bank make money? Because he's teaching me, right? Now he's on his role. He's like, how
Right.
does a bank make money? I'm like, well, they take our deposits and they lend it out and they make money lending. He said, no, they
Mhm.
make a spread. They pay you interest and me interest on the money we deposit. They then charge us more interest on the loans that they make. They make a spread. Everything I just told you, Chris, I take money, I put it into the account. My money earns 6%. I can use that money at 4. I make a 2-point spread. You pay me 14. I'm making money twice on every single dollar. My money's working for me 2 times when your money's working for you once.
Mhm.
What?
Yeah. Right. And your
What?
frame of reference is Wall Street, right? Like
Wall Street.
traditional banking, all that. And all of a sudden it's like, what? What is
I
this?
I was I literally, at this point, I'm like, I just found the secret sauce from this wealthy
Yeah.
guy. I am going to take this thing. I'm going to learn all about it, and I'm
Mhm.
going to go out and I'm going to make millions of dollars. This is what's going through my head.
Yeah.
So I say to him, Mike, what is this? Because
Mhm.
that's what all your audience is thinking. That's probably what
Yeah.
you're thinking. They're like, what is this thing? And he says to me, kind of looks at me stupidly, and he says, Chris, you know what this is. You're an advisor, right? And I said,
Mhm.
yeah, of course. He said, Chris, it's a specially designed and engineered whole life insurance policy from a mutually owned company that pays dividends. And I just use this process called the infinite banking concepts. The whole restaurant literally just stopped talking in my head.
Mhm.
Everything went silent, because whole life to me as an advisor was a terrible, terrible
Absolutely.
place to put money. I
Absolutely.
immediately went from thinking Mike was the most brilliant human being on earth to thinking Mike just got bamboozled, scammed, and is the stupidest person I've ever met
And
in
I
my
need to
life.
rescue him now.
But I wanted everything he just told me.
Yeah.
But when he told me what it was, I'm like, nope, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Mike, listen, I sold lots of whole life and it doesn't work that way. You can't put money in a whole life and immediately take that money out and this, that, and the other thing. He says, Chris, he says, if it doesn't work this way, then how have I been doing it all this time? So what was I going to say? He'd
Right.
been lending me money. I'm like, well, I got nothing to say against that. So
Yeah.
my answer was, show me how to do this.
Mhm.
Teach me this. And he said, I can't. I learned from this guy, Brent. And I immediately said, give me Brent's number. You see,
Mhm.
now I didn't even care about the private lending
Yeah.
anymore. All I wanted was the secret, I
Mhm.
want to know what this thing is. Why is it that I think one thing about this, and then this wealthy guy who's using this system is doing something different? So I got a hold of Brent. Now, let me just kind of cut the chase. Brent is now my business partner.
Mhm.
Me and Brent have gone on to create this ginormous, empire company. We teach people how to be the bank. We teach everything Mike just talked about.
Mhm.
We do one thing and one thing only. And that's what I do today. And I did. Remember, I said I had that idea. I'm going to go off and make millions of dollars. We've made tens and of millions. We have thousands of clients. And I'm not bragging, Mike. I'm just simply bringing you to the final conclusion of the story. This is where I'm at today. I
Mhm.
still do the exact same thing. Flip Out Academy is still around, but I don't operate it anymore. It just holds trademarks and some IP stuff. We have technology companies today. We have the Infinite Banking General Agency, and we have Private Money Club, and that's what I do today. But I want to go back to when I was 16.
Mhm.
I make a ton of money today, Mike. And I'm not trying to brag. Believe me, I'm not. It's just we just solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, and that's the secret to life. If you give enough, which I give, teach, 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 and
Mhm.
ask nothing in return, then you get. And that's all it is. I just solve a really big problem for a lot of people. But the one thing that I have lost, I have a 5.5-year-old daughter now. She's everything to me.
Mhm.
And I love snowboarding. I take her out. We've got a place out there and we go snowboarding all the time. But I don't have freedom of time anymore. I built these giant companies, giant enterprise. But now that enterprise is almost, I've become a slave to it.
Mhm.
So now I'm at a point now, 2026 is a year where we're redoing and reorging all of our companies. We're adding lots of AI and technology into our infrastructure and our workflows. And I'm positioning these companies, the entire company, all of it, for sale. And in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to exit. And it's probably going to be, I've got a deposit ticket that's been in my pocket for 4 years for 350 million. I think it'll be north of that. And again, not bragging. These are how you have to look at life.
Yeah.
Money is abundant. You can have as much of it as you want. You just have to disrupt it. You have to
Mhm.
find a way to solve people's problems, and you have to get in the middle of the money flow and disrupt that money. And
Mhm.
that's what I've learned how to do really well in this entire journey that we've just gone on this amazing podcast show that you have. So I hopefully didn't disappoint or talk too much, because I know I went on and on. I just got into it, man. I just got into it. And that's where I'm at. I'm literally trying to get back to my 16-year-old self when I was just doing the things I loved, and I didn't care about money, and I was just seeking freedom.
Yeah.
And I want to experience that freedom with my daughter. I want to live life again. I want to travel the world again. Not I still travel a lot, but I don't travel with my daughter as much.
Yeah.
So I just want freedom of time again. And the exit's going to give me that. But I've thought more in the last year, not about the exit, but about life after the exit.
Mhm.
One of the things that we do a lot is we have a private foundation. We give a lot. We just gave $1 million to my daughter's school for building an arts and performing arts center where we're going to teach financial education to kids and parents. And I've found more love in giving than I have ever found in anything else I've ever done.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm trying to do, is get to that point where I then can transition, and all I focus my time and energy on is how do I give. And that'll be the next, maybe the final chapter of my life.
So 5.5 is a really important age. Mine are 27 and 25. So I'm looking back, right? And they grow up so fast.
Yeah.
It's a blink of an eye, man, and it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we've had Brent on the podcast, and super excited to have you on. I think the next person we're going to have on is Brent's daughter.
Hannah.
I think she's the next person that we need to have come on. Super excited to do that. So you guys are showing people how to build an infinite banking system.
That's
The
correct.
Mike that you were talking about, that you learned all this from. What was his last name?
Mike Baird.
Mike Barrett.
Mike and Dave Baird.
Gotcha. So I bet you're appreciative that you had that conversation with him that day.
Beyond appreciative. We still talk every once in a while.
That's cool, man. So I know you're working on the exit, that kind of thing, right? Is there anything else you guys are working on that you want to cover on this podcast episode?
Yeah, I mean, I guess really big stuff. I mean, technology. I mentioned that we
Yeah.
have a couple technology companies. I look at AI. We were offline talking a little bit about Terminator 2. Love it or hate the movie. You got to watch that
I
movie
gotta
to
watch that
understand that.
movie, man.
But I'm the kind of person, like with everything I've done in life, I look at things and I try to say, what problem does this thing solve? And what
Yeah.
is the use case? And then I try to visualize what the outcome is. And that's all I've been doing. I've looked at the life insurance industry, the industry I'm so near and dear to, and I've looked at the problems with it. The industry is dying from within because it's an aging population. The producers that made up what the financial industry is, they're aging out. They call it the silver tsunami. They're aging out. And as those advisors move on to that next phase in their life, as they exit, as they are succeeded by younger advisors, the problem is there's not as many younger advisors or younger agents to take the seats of these older ones.
Hmm.
And when I say that, I mean probably like for every 10 that leave, there's maybe one. Because kids today, younger kids coming out of school, they're just not trained. They don't have the skills to go out and prospect. It's just not a skill set that we live in life
It's
today.
true.
It's absolutely true. I mean, come on, Mike, when we were younger, I mean, you had a paper route, right?
I didn't have a paper route, but I farmed. I farmed for
There you
9
were, you
years.
farmed, but
Yeah.
like we did these things, right? Like
Yeah.
we knew hard work. I'm not saying
Mhm.
kids today don't know hard work. It's just different work.
Mhm.
We went out and we did things. We talked to people. We knew how to communicate because that's all we had. We didn't have phones or computers to stare into. But what I'm getting at is we're in this changing dynamic right now. I look at where we're at right now is the same as the Industrial Revolution. We are in a major pivoting time. You're seeing it in the world. You see divide. You see, just anger. You see people upset. It's all the same because every time you're at this cycle where everything's changing, you have to either get in front of it and understand where it's going, or you're going to be left behind. And that's where we're at right now. So I am spending an exorbitant amount of time and money right now redesigning the life insurance or the infinite banking space. And we're doing it with technology integrated with agentic. And I don't want to get too technical with AI, but there are different kinds of AI. There are kinds that are just told what to do and have a skill set, a
Mhm.
large learning model. And then there's agentic, which basically learns.
Mhm.
It's kind of like talking to you and I. If you've ever talked to AI from Apple, that's agentic. It
Mhm.
learns, it gets to know you, it can communicate with you, it can literally have a conversation. Like I have AI Chris's that I can sit there and I can talk to about God and about the meaning of life. And it's bizarre, but like that's where we're at. So we are building AI into our entire company and building software, very, very revolutionary software for this industry that serves as an operating system. If you think
Mhm.
of like, remember I mentioned atlases when I used to
Mhm.
drive
Yeah.
across the country. Well, someone somewhere decided that that was a stupid way to figure out where you're going to go because you get lost, you got to recalculate, got to almost get in an accident looking at the triptych from
Mhm.
AAA. So they said, you know what? I'm going to develop software that I'm just going to put a destination in. And mathematics and algorithms are going to point me to that place where I want to go, the mathematically most efficient, fastest way I can get there.
Mhm.
We don't know anything else anymore. Kids can't read atlases anymore. No one
Yeah.
can. Like we just use GPS and
Mhm.
it's just a norm. A luxury once realized is now a necessity, right?
Mhm.
That's exactly that. Well, that's what I'm building. I'm building that technology fully integrated and run by AI that becomes an operating system or a GPS for your finances and specifically for you being your own private bank. It is a massive, massive lift. It is
That's
an
cool.
entire dev team and we are well underway on it. It's a multiple $1 million build, but it will change this entire industry. And mark my words, Mike, 5, 10 years from now, we'll look back on this. I will change the life insurance industry forever.
Mhm.
I will single-handedly with what we're building and with lots of help change it so that it will survive and so that we won't need to prospect and we won't need to go and do the things that we do today to be successful in that industry. Technology will be our guiding light or our GPS.
That's way cool, man. I can't wait to see it. That is really, really cool. And
Man,
I'd love to have you back on to talk about it and go over it and take a look at it. And I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been an amazing, amazing time. Thanks, man.
thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.